Alright, in this presentation, we're going to look at three-dimensional figures and the two things that go along with three-dimensional figures, which is volume and surface area. When we talk about three-dimensional figures, there's two different things that we can find. The first one is volume, which is indicated by the letter V. This is the amount of space inside a figure. So it's kind of the next step for area. The other one that we have is surface area, which is denoted by SA. And surface area is the area on the outside of the figure. It's kind of the next level of perimeter. Now there are lots of three-dimensional figures that we can look at. We're going to look at three. The first one is the rectangular solid, which is basically a fancy word for box. And our volume formula is given by V equals L times W times H. We also have surface area. The surface area formula is 2 times L times W plus 2 times W times H plus 2 times L times H. So let's kind of see where this comes from. So if we label our figure here, we have L, W, and H. So what makes up a box? Well, we have a top and a bottom. Those are all using L and W. So we have two rectangles with measurements of L times W. That's our 2LW. We have our two sides. We have this one and this one. The measurements for those are W and H. And we have two rectangles that have an area of W times H. And the last one we have is the front and the back, which have measurements of L times H. Again, we have two of them, so we get 2 times L times H. The next figure that we're going to look at is the pyramid. And the pyramid, we have a square base, and to find the volume, we have V equals 1/3 times capital B times H. Now, when working with pyramids, notice that our pyramid in general, it can have whatever kind of base you want. We're going to look at a rectangular base. And so to find the area of the base, we're going to use what we've always done to find the area of a rectangle. We're going to multiply length times width. And then we also have the addition of the height and the 1/3. This one we're not going to worry about surface area because surface area gets a little complicated based on what your pyramid looks like. The last one we have is a cylinder. The last one we have is the cylinder. Our volume is going to be the area of the base. That's a circle, which is going to be pi r squared times our height. For surface area, we can kind of decompose this. And so what we get is we have two circles. We have our top and our bottom. These each have area of pi r squared. There are two of them, so that's where we get our 2 pi r squared. And then the outside is going to be a rectangle. And our dimensions for the rectangle are going to be the circumference, 2 pi r, times h, our height. In order to get into the cylinder shape, we basically take our rectangle and we roll it up. Okay, so some other things to note. Volume has cubic units. Notice that if we look at any of these volume formulas, there's going to be three things that we're multiplying. We have length times width times height. And if we multiply the units for each of those, then we're going to get cubic units. Surface area, the important thing to remember is surface area is still an area. An area always has square units. All right, so let's go ahead and look at some examples. We're going to start off with our box. The first one we have is a box that measures 3 by 4 by 2 centimeters. So let's start with volume. To calculate our volume, we're going to use L times W times H. I'm going to let 3 be L. I'm going to let 4 be W. And I'm going to let 2 be my H. Now, one thing to note is it does not matter where you plug these numbers in as long as you are consistent. So if we plug into our formula, we get 3 times 4 times 2. And if we multiply that out, we get 24. We include our units. We have centimeters times centimeters times centimeters. That's 3. And so we get 24 centimeters cubed. So our volume is 24 cubic centimeters. Let's go ahead and look at our surface area now. We get 2 LW plus 2 LH plus 2 WH. So when we plug in, we get 2 times L was 3, W was 4, plus 2 times L was 3, H was 2, plus 2 times W was 4, H was 2. All right, let's go ahead and multiply this out. 2 times 3 times 4 is 24, plus 2 times 3 times 2 is 12, plus 2 times 4 times 2 is 16. If we add this all together, we get 52 is our surface area. And we include our correct units. Remember, this is essentially an area, so it's going to be centimeters squared. All right, let's try one more just to make sure that we have it down. Our next box that we have is 2 by 7 by 10. I'm going to let 2 be my L. I'm going to let 7 be my W. And I'm going to let 10 be my H. So if we start with volume, we get V. Here's our formula again. L times W times H. If we plug in, we get V equals 2 times 7 times 10. All right, go ahead, multiply this together, and we get 140. We include our correct units, which is inches cubed. So there is our volume. All right, the other one we have is surface area. So remember that this is going to be 2 times LW plus 2 times LH plus 2 times WH. If we plug in, we get 2 times 2 times 7 plus 2 times 2 times 10 plus 2 times 7 times 10. All right, if we go ahead and multiply this out, we get 2 times 2 times 7 is 28. 2 times 2 times 10 is 40. And 2 times 7 times 10 is 140. If we add this together, I get 208. We include our correct units. We get 208 inches squared. All right, that takes care of our rectangular solid or our box. All right, let's talk about the pyramid now. Okay, so recall that the formula for we're just going to find volume on this one. Recall that our formula for volume is 1/3 capital B times H. So the first thing we need to do is we need to find capital B. Remember, capital B is the area of the base. So to find the area of the base, I'm going to multiply 6 times 4. If we multiply those two numbers together, we get 24. And if you need to, this is centimeters squared since it is an area. So let's go ahead and plug in what we've got so far. So we got 1/3. The area of our base is 24. And our height is 11. Okay, 1/3 of 24. I recommend using, since 1/3 is not a terminating decimal, I'm going to go ahead and work with it in fraction form. 1/3 times 24, these do cancel, leaving me with 8. So we get, our volume is 8 times 11, or 88 centimeters. And since we are talking volume, it is going to be cubic centimeters. That is the pyramid, and that's all we're going to work with on our pyramid. Okay, last one we have is our cylinder, or our can. So let's go ahead and look at some examples of this. Our first one we have is a cylinder that has a diameter of 20 meters and a height of 9. So if you look back at your cylinder formulas, one thing to note is there is no D in the formulas, there is only R's. So if that's our first thing that we want to do, is we want to find R. So if our diameter is 20, we want to take half of the diameter. So we get R is equal to 10 centimeters. So let's start with volume. Volume is equal to pi R squared times H. If we plug in what we know, Remember, pi is equal to 3.14. R is 10. Squared, I'm going to go ahead and just write it out twice, times my h, which is 9. Just to speed things along, let's go ahead and multiply this using a calculator. I get 28, 26. We include our correct units, which is cubic meters. And so there is our volume. All right, let's look at surface area. Remember that our surface area, we have our two circles, so we get 2 times pi r squared, plus the area of the outside rectangle, which is 2 pi r, our circumference, times our height. All right, so if we go ahead and plug into this, we get 2 times 3.14 times 10 times 10 plus 2 times 3.14 times 10 times 9. Okay, so if we go ahead and multiply, I get 628 plus 565.2. That's our multiplication. And now if we go ahead and add this together, I get 1193.2. This is an area, and so my units are going to be meters squared. Okay, there's our first one. Let's look at another one just to make sure that we got this down. Our second one is a cylinder with a radius of 4, so we don't need to do any extra work there. We already have our radius. And we're going to let 12 be our height. So if we go ahead and plug in, remember volume is pi r squared h. If we plug in, we get pi is 3.14 times 4 squared, or 4 times 4, times 12. If we go ahead and multiply this out, I get volume is equal to 602.88 feet cubed. All right, let's look at surface area. Surface area, our formula is 2 pi r squared plus 2 pi r h. If we plug in, we get 2 times 3.14 times 4 squared, or 4 times 4, plus 2 times 3.14 times 4 times 12. So if we go ahead and multiply on the first one, 2 times 3.14 times 4 times 4, I get 100.48 plus, if we multiply the second one, I get 301.44. We go ahead and add these together, and we get 401.92 is our surface area. We include our correct units, which is feet squared, and we're done. Okay, so that's some volume and surface area formulas. As I mentioned, there are other figures out there that you may see later in mathematics, but that gives you an idea of kind of what we can do. So that takes care of our volumes, our areas, our perimeters, our circumferences, and then the next presentation we're going to look at a couple other little things that we want that pertain to geometry. So we will see you again in a little bit to talk about Pythagorean theorem.